It seems as if identity politics has no nadir. And a new tale of social justice, i.e. political demands, appears to support that theory. It's a new addition to the expanding grievance library from a UCLA law professor who, get this, now suggests that the U.S. government and, by logical extension, U.S. taxpayers give Latinos so-called reparations. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC-TV. Yep, it's a frustrating new wrinkle in the unappealing face of SJW postmodernism. But as it frustrates and angers us, perhaps it offers thoughtful people an opportunity. It gives us the opportunity to critically examine not just the idea of government tax-funded reparations for ancient state activities, but what state-based so-called reparations actually show us about government itself. Matthew Keyes offers the story via Campus Reform. A book titled Inventing Latinos, A New Story of American Racism, written by University of California, Los Angeles School of Law, Professor Laura Gomez, is advocating for the United States to provide reparations for the Latino community, which at the outset presents a few definitional problems. First, what is Latino? According to Daniel Alvarenga of Medium, Latinx, or the weird-sounding gender-neutral term for Latino and Latina, applies to someone who can trace their heritage to at least one of 33 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, including Portuguese-speaking Brazil. This identity is tied to geography and excludes Spain. He also notes the fascinating origin of the term Latin America, arising from a term coined by the French as Amérique latine. It signified places colonized by people of Latin descent who speak Romance languages like Spanish, Portuguese, and French. This is why Haiti, colonized by France, is often included in the definition of Latin America. And that geographical historical characteristic stands in contrast to Hispanic, which is based on one's heritage being tied to folks who mainly speak the Spanish language. Someone whose heritage includes Spanish-speaking people from anywhere, including Spain. This identity is tied to language and excludes Brazil. For some, this term further emphasizes the colonization of, or by, Spain in Latin America. And to further complicate matters, get this. Hispanic first appeared on the census in 1970. Before then, Hispanic and Latinx people were classified as white and by their country of origin. Grassroots activists and Spanish-language broadcasters spearheaded the campaign to make Hispanic a widely used term, but for different reasons. All of which presents us with a major logical problem, even if we accept the flawed premise of government reparations for historically recorded wrongs. Ms. Gomez is advocating for reparations directed at a so-called Latino community. But even though the term Latino can be defined, the Latino community is simply an amorphous left-wing touchy-feely term that collapses when scrutinized. This so-called community is composed of nation-states that not only have seen their borders change over generations, they saw people fighting over those borders, killing and conquering each other. For example, between 600 BC and 900 AD, the originally pre-Mayan Tikal people were based in what's now delineated by new borders under the name Guatemala, and they fought the Calakmul people located in what's now Mexico at least 3 times between 537 and 744 AD. The Aztecs conquered much of Central America between 1345 and 1521 AD, and by the 16th century, the Incans had taken lands covering most of the western coast of South America. And that doesn't even take into consideration more recent boundary changes and conflicts between nations such as Chile, Bolivia, and Peru in the late 19th century. So how exactly is this a Latino community? And how far back should reparations go? Is there some invisible chain of guilt that can tie contemporary people who never harmed others to their ancestors and to non-relatives who might have lived in those nation states or tribes, or on any given day been mean to someone but then might have been nice later on? How is this actually all to be quantified, and by whom? It's probably not a good idea to look for answers from Ms. Gomez. In fact, like many folks who push identity politics, the culture of victimization is what she seems to prefer for her focus. According to Gomez's website, the main theme of the book, as described from an excerpt from the introduction, is, quote, the how and why of Latinx identity becoming a distinctive racial identity, end quote. Furthermore, it says, quote, this book explains how and why Latinos became cognizable as a racial group that is other and inferior to whites. And while it's sad and troubling to see her perpetuate racial division and the individuality-destroying concept of perpetual stereotyping and victim cloaking, she begins to make a point when addressing questions in a UCLA interview, saying, thankfully, we're talking a lot more about reparations to African Americans. I think that's a long overdue conversation. How do we repair the damage that racism has done? That's not where she makes her point. She said, adding that because of the way that American military, government, and corporations infiltrated Central America and destroyed the indigenous way of life and slaughtered so many people. And while the first part of her comment really has no merit, the second part does. The idea of reparations is highly suspect, but she makes some valid points about United States meddling in Central America and South America. Heck, the very term banana republic stems from U.S. military and intel operations conducted in Honduras and Nicaragua between 1903 and 1925 on behalf of the huge banana seller, the United Fruit Company. But, as noted before, even if the government of the U.S. engaged in unlawful activities back then, how are current citizens culpable for the actions of those politicians and military members of that era? In fact, how were Americans who didn't vote for any of the politicians of that era, who were, in fact, forced to pay taxes under penalty of legal action, culpable in any way? If Gomez claims that innocents abroad or their descendants in the U.S. should be paid by people who never harmed them, then is that not new victimization through government force? And isn't the only way government gets its cash actually through the involuntary servitude of taxpayers? If one accepts her idea for reparations, then will she actually apply her standards such that current taxpayers will receive reparations themselves? Gomez likely won't answer that question, but she has one more point. People in Central America should get asylum here, like we had asylum for the Vietnamese, for Cubans. We must allow folks in. Well, that's an idea that could lead to fruitful conversation, and I don't mean the United Fruit Company, and some disagreement. But one thing is certain. Ms. Gomez doesn't understand that reparations can only come through common law torts, through one aggrieved person making a claim against another. Implying that today's generation is guilty of the sins of previous generations is flawed and immoral. Thank you so much for joining me, everyone. And remember, if you're watching on YouTube, I'll see you in the comments section. Please be sure to like and subscribe and spread these videos to your friends. Share them as often as you can. We'll see you at MRCTV.org. That's MRCTV.org. And if you want some great items for Christmas, go to MRC-Store. We're inside Facebook. We're on Instagram. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Gab. If you want to find me on Gab, it's at Gardner Goldsmith. And I really appreciate being able to communicate with you. For MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.